Let's talk about 10 things that can impact your or affect your property valuation as well as the tax assessment on a home. So these are 10 things that kind of can impact the actual value. And when I say value, I mean like an appraiser's valuation, right? So yes, somebody may be willing to buy your home and they may be willing to pay more, but when it comes to actually doing an appraisal, that's a little different because appraisers are looking, it's 95 and making this part up, but close to it, right? 95% science. There is 5% that is art, where it's kind of like a opinion, but I'd say overall they have their standards and what they do. And what folks don't realize is things that what appraisers take into consideration. So let's talk about the 10 factors that can affect your property valuation and even your tax assessment. So going through those, the first and foremost, it's obvious and you can't do anything about this, right? It's just the location of the home, right? So a home that's located in prime real estate, like in the heart of a big city or something like that, or in the really good part of town, it's going to be worth more just because the dirt is worth more, right? So in other words, if it, like here in Dallas, if you go to the Park Cities area, you got $1 million, little lot for $1 million, whereas you can go out to the north of the Metroplex or east or wherever it is outside the city for $1 million, you can get acreage, a lot of acres. So location, again, you can't do anything about it, but that's certainly one, right? The dirt is going to have a big part as far as the valuation and where that is. Number two is the size of the home. And that makes sense. Now, what people don't understand is when they say, hey, this area is $150 a square foot or $200 a square foot or whatever it is, understand that dollar per square foot is the result of the appraiser and what they do to come up with the value is not because of that. The appraisers don't just take that number and come up with it. They do a whole lot of other stuff, but the size, they will go through and say, okay, if it's X dollars, $50 a square foot difference, because again, it's more than just the square feet. There's more that into a house besides just how big or small it is. But if they say, hey, it's $50 a square foot, if a house has an extra 100 square feet, obviously it's going to have then that extra $5,000 valuation because 50 times the 100 is going to be that $5,000. So the other thing to note about square footage is this: make sure it's accurate, right? So the appraiser is going to do their best to get accurate information. But if you can find that whether it's on MLS or the tax value or something like that, and it's not, or the tax valuation, whatever's on the central appraisal district, make sure the appraiser has the correct value or the correct number for the square footage to make sure they're actually using correct numbers. As far as the age and condition of the house, this is one where folks don't think this matters, but it does, right? So there's two parts of this where it's the condition piece is how nice the house is or isn't, right? And as far as upkeep and maintenance and things like that, and the age is another. So a brand new home versus one that's 100 years old. The 100-year-old home doesn't have the latest and greatest in terms of efficiency and just the retardant, fire retardant stuff, and all the other stuff that goes into all today's new construction. So age will certainly have an impact on that, as well as just the condition of the house. Because again, a brand new roof is going to have a significantly more value than, and again, not a ton, but more than the old roof that's 100 years old and can go up when the match gets lit. So the structural integrity of the house comes into play, renovation and upgrades, right? So the 100-year-old home, if they just did a full remodel, gutted the whole thing, obviously that's going to make a bigger valuation than if the home's still in its original valuation. And then the historical piece, we'll talk about that in a little bit as far as where the home's located and if it is historical or not. And then the maintenance costs as well, right? So while the maintenance cost doesn't impact the actual valuation from an appraiser standpoint, it will from a marketability standpoint for somebody who wants to buy the home. So for example, I've had rental properties before where the water was just insane. And yes, we checked for leaks. We even had the water meter replaced. It just, I don't know why, it just cost a lot. So that part, if a homeowner or prospective home buyer asks you for your bills, whether it's energy efficient whether it's water or electricity or things like that, that will certainly have some impact as well. Again, we've kind of talked about it, the upgrades, if it's a fixer upper, the question you got to ask yourself, especially if you're going to be a seller, is it worth spending, $40,000 to upgrade the whatever you need your kitchen, let's say? Is it worth spending 40 grand to do that, or just sell the house at a 40 grand discount, right? But maybe doing the 40 grand kitchen remodel can now make it to where you can sell it for 60 grand or 70 grand more. That's where you got to consult somebody in the real estate profession that knows that area really, really well. The other piece is just don't over personalize your property. So if you're building one, especially, but you can drive around Dallas and see some really funky homes. Now, that may not necessarily impact the valuation from an appraiser standpoint, but certainly marketability. If the home's really, really funky, really choppy, or you built like, only 2 bedrooms, one for you and one for your kid, but it's in a community where there's 4 bedrooms, it's going to be really hard to sell that later on. That'll absolutely impact your valuation as well as your marketability. So don't, understand that while you build a home or when you buy a home, someday you may say, this is my forever home. Maybe, but at some point, somewhere in the history, like you will someday that won't be your home, and maybe 100 years from now. But think of that piece as well. Comps, this part is beyond your control, but it's what are homes in the area selling for. That is how appraisers come up with their valuation. So it's not necessarily anything you can do outside of just understand that it's going to be your neighbors and what they do can impact your valuation. As far as we talked square footage early on, if you add on to your home, make sure you do it right. Make sure you get the proper permits. One, from a safety standpoint, you need to do that. Two, just from a compliance piece to be a good law-abiding citizen. But three, make sure that you're doing it so that the appraiser can give you full valuation for what you just did. Because I got to be honest, I don't remember the outcome of this, but I know that somebody did something that it shouldn't have. And the appraiser was like, dude, I can't use that because it wasn't a code and they did all this other stuff. So I would just say, make sure you're being compliant when you're building. I know you may be trying to like avoid paying taxes on it and things like that, but I would just say do it right. Get your permits and do what you're supposed to do. Number 8, curb appeal. So this is huge. Like realtors will tell me the house is basically sold before they even walk in the house just because of the curb appeal. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Is it welcoming? Are there, new plants outside versus like old dead ones? So I would say that is the biggest piece from a marketability standpoint. It technically doesn't show up on paper in terms of like comps and other things of that nature, but I will tell you from a marketability standpoint, it's huge. Number 9, the historical significance. It's really cool to own some homes that are like, in the historic area, whether it's, because they look neat or have there's some, story behind them. The reality is it's great, but not everybody wants that. I personally wouldn't, and that's just me. That's just not my thing to where I have to go follow guidelines of, if I want to improve it or want to do something to it, you got to maintain the integrity of the home. Good for you if you have one or if you want one, but just understand that may appeal to some folks and it may turn others off. And then lastly, and this one, again, you can't really control it, but the surrounding properties, and this is why I'm not a fan of Airbnb. I usually don't take this kind of stance, but I will tell you, I don't think Airbnb should be allowed to have 20 people rent the house next to me and throw some massive party 3 nights a week just because it's a good Airbnb. So, but your neighbors around you, the neighborhood, if there's a massive Walmart that goes up behind your house versus that of having some nature preserve. I mean, those kind of things, it goes back to kind of the first one, which is location, location, location. But if the neighborhood is starting to go down and windows are starting to break, that whole theory where it's like, this one starts getting junky, the next one gets junky, that may be a good sign to just be one of the first ones to abandon ship. I had a boss that once said the good swimmers jump first, right, on a sinking ship. So if the neighborhood's not doing well, you might consider relocating. If it is, and you're starting to come up and it's getting gentrified and people are spending money, man, good for you. That's the place to buy, is when it's on the way up, obviously. So those are some obvious and some less obvious things of what you can do to how to impact both your valuation and marketability of buying a home. And if you agree or disagree with anything I just said, feel free to reach out and let us know. We're always open for feedback. And when you think mortgage, think Mark.